California women won their right to vote in 1911, and with that victory, California became the foremost democracy in the world, where over 500,000 women could now vote. With some of their Western sisters, California women won this right to vote 9 years before the rest of American women would vote. The California suffrage campaign is unique for its short, 8-month duration, for the scope and the diversity of people. However, in 1911, it was also remarkable for its innovations and strategies. The 3 words, votes for women, may seem tame and obvious today, but in 1911, they ignited a political controversy whose flames still burn in many parts of the world today. Votes for Women was first proposed in 1848 by Elizabeth Cady Stanton at Seneca Falls, New York. But it was the West that led the way for suffrage rights. Wyoming in 1869, followed by Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. Western men had depended upon the courage and partnership of women in the settlement of the untamed West. These men knew that equality was not simply a right, it was a necessity. In the gold-rich, powerful California, the women recognized these early suffrage victories and pushed for their own rights to equality. However, the 1896 suffrage amendment went down to defeat by over 20,000 votes. The struggle for California suffrage would last for 15 more years as women reorganized and rededicated themselves to the rightness of their cause. Lillian Coffin, a magnetic and spirited businesswoman and highly influential lobbyist, knew the legislators by name. In a colorful march, she led 300 women to meet with lawmakers and presented their case. Persistent pressure from passionate women and supportive men influenced lawmakers. Finally, on February 2, 1911, the state Senate and House voted to place woman suffrage on a special October 1911 election. With only 8 months to Election Day, California women faced a whirlwind campaign in a state over 1,000 miles long and rich in diversity. Elizabeth Watson, inspiring speaker and organizer who had been active in the 1896 campaign, invited women leaders from the state's various organizations to unite and devise a plan for victory. Charlotte Whitney, college-educated reformer and the brilliant president of the important College Equal Suffrage League. Maud Younger, a wealthy woman whose compassion and commitment to the working women brought her to work for their rights. Catherine Edson, an advocate for labor and health measures, and Clara Foltz, the fiery Los Angeles lawyer who inspired other women to give all for suffrage. These younger organizers brought renewed energy, new ideas, and innovative tactics to the depleted 1896 suffrage movement.
Without further ado, let us hear from the various sections of our state.
So, first, let's start with the 2 domains of activity. In the suffrage vote of 96, the North was so overwhelming against a woman's right to vote that even the small victories in the South could not compensate. That is what must change. You women in the North have many more established suffrage groups. So you take all areas north of the Tehachapi Mountains, and we in the South will saturate the cities, towns, and farms in the rest of the state.
The emancipation of women may not have begun with the vote, but rather when they mounted a good horse and realized how different and fine the view. From the back of a horse, the world looked wider. Joyce Gibson Roach. As the Victorian age turned into the first decade of the new 20th century, California moved from a rugged frontier to a cultivated and cultured state, one marketed as a paradise and as a land of opportunity. Leaving behind the Eastern images of womanhood and dependence on men, many women found that the land out west offered new freedoms and possibilities. Oil and oranges, sun and verdant fields, health and wealth, and the promise of prosperity attracted a migration of stable, middle-class citizens, mostly from the farming states of the Midwest. Completion of 2 railroad lines brought 50,000 new residents a year. In Los Angeles alone, the population grew from 50,000 in 1900 to 320,000 by 1910, a 6-fold increase. The advance in irrigation systems produced a shift from small family farms to grand ranches. Industries previously performed by women in their homes became major manufacturing companies, canning, textiles, food services. Displaced from their traditional roles in the home and on the farm, young women moved to the cities to work in those industries formerly associated with the home. Women also branched out into retail and clerical positions. These businesses increased the clerical workforce in California 50% in one decade. Women desired more education to become teachers, nurses, business professionals, and California met that need. Stanford University opened as a co-educational institution. Women graduates at Stanford grew from 8 in 1895 to over 200 in 1910. As women assumed greater participation in their society, their lack of political equality became more obviously unjust, and by 1911, the right to equal suffrage was a strong battle cry. The time was ripe for a full-fledged campaign.
How can we not be outraged at the deplorable conditions in which working women and girls are forced to endure? It is only through the vote that we can, and we will, make changes.
Yes, of course. But we must have a campaign that upends old reasoning and gives all women dignity of self.
Let us, the members of the Wage Earners League, both North and South, wage our own campaign to relate to these women and their men with appropriate talk and literature.
Yes.
At the turn of the 20th century, San Francisco was a bustling cultural center and the wealthiest and largest city west of the Mississippi. Here, in 1910, Selina Solomons, a fiery middle-class Jewish leader from the 1896 campaign, opened her Votes for Women Club as a way to connect women of all means and stations in society, a meeting place where women could learn about their rights and discuss the events of the day. Solomons provided inexpensive lunches, dispersed suffrage literature, and invited speakers to stimulate discussions, like Maud Younger, the millionaire waitress and union organizer. The New York City Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire took 143 young women's lives because employers confined workers for long hours in a small space and had locked the doors to escape exits. In this and in their own personal experiences, California's working women saw the need to be involved for fair and safe working conditions. They were encouraged to form unions and work for the vote. In trade unions, wage-earning women were molded into social and political activists.
Women are 80% of elementary and high school teachers. 30% more girls are in school. And we women graduate high school at a higher rate, 3 girls to 2 boys. And certainly, those who teach and train our young people ought to be voting citizens.
And as long as every speaker and every rally, every press article and piece of literature is like breakfast food to make the vote necessary and palatable and keep the issue before the men.
Yes, but a cause progresses in proportion to the circulation of its literature.
California distributed more printed material and press releases than any other state, even given its size. 10,000 columns of suffrage news were sent out to the 700 newspapers in the state. As early as the 1880s, women had started their own printing presses, launched their own newspapers, printed literature, and recognized the power of the press to inform and educate both rural and urban voters. They flooded the public with over 3 million fly sheets, mailed or handed out in the months preceding the election. In San Francisco, women prepared 35,000 pieces of literature for mailings in 1 week alone. To connect with the diverse population, suffragists wrote articles in foreign languages, Spanish, German, Italian, Portuguese, and sent 10,000 letters to Spanish speakers. Under the expert leadership of Alice Park of Palo Alto, suffrage literature addressed specific arguments and targeted defined voters. Why the Wage-Earning Women Should Vote by Maud Younger, to the farmers and fruit growers. Why the Teacher Should Be a Suffragist. Their literature and news also trained speakers and ordinary citizens how to convincingly discuss the issues, Debate arguments were printed and studied so that when speakers went out to persuade voters, they could easily handle the questions and the objections. Press releases highlighted local suffrage news and made it part of the dinnertime conversation. Women who had never seen their names in print were recognized and proud that their activities and their stand counted for something important. The suffrage victory can be credited in large part to the women's use of the press and their organization around this powerful, accessible, extensive, and free outlet. Women's clubs were established as places for women to connect with others and for education, arts and literature, children's needs, social reform, and charity work. Within these clubs, women were given the tools to go out of the home and into public life. Wealthy women showed how to raise money, and enterprising business ladies marketed their own goods. The 163 California women's clubs were an important and powerful force in the campaign as they identified women's concerns through civic participation with the power of the vote. In discussing why women should vote, we learn of other things that need reforming, like pure milk, early education, protection of the redwoods, treatment of animals, the sick, the homeless, the elderly. With club women's commitment to the vote, they change from delicate flowers and ladies to women. Women are the great undeveloped resources of this country. If we are to live up to our possibilities in political life, we must welcome the trial by fire that a suffrage campaign affords. Mrs. Grace Simons, President, the California Federation of Women's Clubs.
I might also add that many Southern men are already involved as well. Mr. John Brawley has formed the Political Equity League with over 100 men to support our cause. They speak out very strongly to their brothers and support us with conviction in their earnest belief in equality. We must remember that it is the man who votes for this amendment whom we must win over. He must feel our reasons. We must appeal to him.
And we must put forth honest and educated arguments before him again and again.
The College Equal Suffrage League attracts educated young women who want to play an active role. We're involved in all kinds of strategic tactics to attract the men to our cause, which we will gladly share with you all. We can learn from each other. What strategy works and what does not. There's no point in reinventing the wheel when what we really need is a bigger, more powerful wheel.
The powerful wheels that Charlotte Whitney's college women rolled across the state in was their spectacular Blue Liner, a 1910 seven-seater touring car. The revolutionary automobile attracted men like a circus barker, seducing men with its beauty and novelty. Once captivated, the men stayed to listen to the speaker who had provided the show. Soon, other groups and speakers mounted all sorts of traveling platforms to reach towns and rural areas and talk about the equal suffrage amendment. John Brawley of Los Angeles offered his beautiful car and traveled extensively as he spoke tirelessly for a woman's right to vote. Major companies like Shredded Wheat and Campbell's Soup packaged their products with suffrage slogans. Banks attracted female customers by supporting women's rights, and businesses knew that the buying power of women was increased when women recognized an ally in their cause. Some merchants displayed their support by placing suffrage literature in their packages or displaying signs in their windows, all in the spirit of mutual cooperation and benefit. Suffragists themselves used consumerism and commercial enterprise to spread their message for equal rights in creative, innovative, and ingenious ways. For a personal identification with their cause, they distributed over 100,000 buttons to adorn their supporters' clothes. They distributed 18,000 pennants, signs, and posters for citizens to display in the windows of their homes, always keeping the message of votes for women before the public eye. Tea parties and luncheons were held to discuss suffrage, raise money, and recruit workers, and to sell suffrage tea. In 1 week, young women on street corners sold over 13,000 colorful and humorous postcards for 5 cents each to raise funds and to spread the word. suffrage messages on such common household items as playing cards, cookbooks, fly swatters, saturated homes. Suffrage seeds encouraged gardens of yellow flowers statewide, especially with the symbolic sunflower. Common products often stimulated discussion of the issue. The public became the voice for women's right to vote. In this innovative, commercialized political sphere, suffragists became artists, entrepreneurs, and advertisers for their cause. We have to persuade every man that a woman's right to vote is good for him, too. Dr. Charlotte Baker, San Diego. Canvassing a one-on-one meeting was frightening work for women who rarely talked to strangers outside their own neighborhoods. Now they were being asked to venture into homes and workplaces and to ask every woman, "Will your husband vote for suffrage?"
Now, my husband, he's going to vote the suffrage.
Well, thank your husband for his vote. We need everyone we can get.
I will.
In this house-to-house work, the canvasser found her own convictions, and the experience was the training ground for future speakers and organizers. As the campaign advanced, canvassing spread out into public places. To meet citizens face-to-face, suffragists stood on street corners, in railroad yards and stores, rode trolley cars and ferries, and posted handbills announcing meetings and events. Everywhere one looked, signs demanding votes for women were present. Small towns and rural areas felt important when prominent speakers like Clara Foltz visited and paid attention to them.
And now, if I may, I am proud to introduce one of the leaders of this movement, the first woman ever allowed to practice law in our state, Southern California's own Mrs. Clara Foltz.
Thank you. Greetings, citizens of Chino. I want to thank you all for being here today to find out more about this important issue. Do we not all have the same interests? Safe neighborhoods, good schools, pure milk for our children? For they are the future of our great nation, and it is our responsibility to assure that every young boy and girl receive the knowledge and the opportunities they need to meet the challenges of this new century. And to women everywhere, I say, never apologize for demanding your rights, and never cease in your quest for suffrage until each and every female citizen in our great country has the right to vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
They were trained and then sent out into all parts of the state. As she mounted a humble wooden crate, disguising her nervousness with cordial pleasantries, a few supporters, then curious onlookers, became an audience for a suffrage talk. Soon, talk of women's suffrage could be heard in every corner of the state. The prominent Spanish leader was Maria Lopez, a UC Berkeley graduate and Los Angeles high school teacher. She often targeted rural districts which she felt were indifferent to equal rights and whose women needed equality and legal protection even more than urban and wealthy women. With Labor Day and a month to go before the fate of the suffrage amendment, workers doubled their efforts to reach every voter, particularly in areas where suffrage had not been advanced. Labor Day parades in towns and cities gave the suffrage cause a showcase. Some floats were dramatic, with horses and buglers. Other floats regally presented the women's firmness of spirit and demand for the vote. The anti-suffragists were also out in full force, spurring debates and forums on the issue. They ran full-page newspaper ads publicizing that women really did not want the vote. Suffragists answered convincingly with endorsements by the state's leading women's organizations who did want the right to vote. Suffragists also staged spectacles. They invaded baseball games with voting cards and flyers. Women ascended in a hot air balloon to throw suffrage literature and sunflowers onto a Los Angeles park.
For women, October 10th, for women!
hundreds of donuts with Votes for Women ribbons were handed out in the parks where political speeches were not allowed. Huge banners, 10 by 14 feet, floated down from bridges and trees. The days before Election Day were filled with large rallies in both San Francisco and Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, a flurry of 50 to 60 meetings a week completed the campaign until the final rally, when 4,000 people gathered in the city's largest theater, the Temple Auditorium.
What about Mother? Isn't she good enough to vote? Why shouldn't women be allowed to vote? Every man in America votes. Rich men, poor men, beggar men, thieves, men who cannot speak a word of English, drunkards, degenerates, fraud, counterfeiters, pig-headed men, skillet-headed men, men with one idea, men with half an idea, politicians, ballot stuffers. Their only qualification for voting, they must all be male.
The final proof that women wanted the right to vote can be seen in the numbers who committed to poll watching. In San Francisco alone, 2,000 suffragists signed up to mind the 356 precincts from 6 a.m. to midnight.
All right. Where do I sign up?
Right here. I could get my husband and brothers to come into your district and protect you so no harm comes your way.
Oh, no. We can take care of ourselves. And we'll make sure that the menfolk vote. They know how hard the vote was for them, and they know how important the vote is for us women. No, I don't expect any trouble from them.
Thank you. We are honored to be united with you and your club in this common cause. Good work, Mrs. Harris. Good work.
Precinct workers were trained for the October 10th election. Women then held their breath as the men of California voted for their equal right to citizenship. Early returns from San Francisco city precincts were shockingly unfavorable. The vote was 3-1 against suffrage. Early news headlines flashed, "Suffrage is defeated by 8,000 votes." Sad, but not dejected, Mrs. Watson and other leaders refused to be bowed. "Sail on! Sail on! We shall renew the battle if we must." As the women in San Francisco went to bed that midnight, results from Alameda and Marin counties echoed the earlier returns. The vote was still overwhelmingly against suffrage. Northern women were hopeful still, as the margin of opposition was slimmer than it had been in 1896. By the next morning, other counties were heard from. Tallies from Los Angeles, San Diego, Fresno, Santa Clara, and outlying counties. If victory were at hand, it would be the farmer, the miner, and the South who would save the day. Victory for suffrage was not declared for 3 agonizing days. By the narrow margin of 3,587 votes, or 1 vote per precinct, or 1% of the voters, suffrage had won. Every courageous man's vote counted and was vital to the outcome. When California's suffrage victory was announced, Dr. Anna Howard Shaw, the Eastern suffrage leader, addressed a big rally in New York City. A light, a light. It is the greatest single advance that the movement in America has yet made, and put life and energy into the present national campaign. In the 10 days following the passage of the California Suffrage Amendment, 16,000 women registered, 2,500 on the first day of their citizenship. When a woman was asked about her new right to vote, she said, "There is a new dignity granted to our sex, and a sacred reverence paid us that we did not receive before our liberation." Newly enfranchised women voted for the first time in the Los Angeles mayoral election on December 5th, and within a year were serving on juries and running for municipal offices. Participating as full citizens, registered California women voted in the 1912 presidential election. The work for suffrage transformed the consciousness of California women and gave them their first informal education that change is possible. This campaign was not run by those who had experience in such work, but by women whose fervor was tireless, by women who had no idea they could ever speak in public or talk to a stranger, but who did so because they were moved to. We can make a difference when we are impassioned by the rightness of the cause.
There is a band of women, and to our manor born, emerging from the darkness past and looking toward the morn. Their mothers labored, waited through a night without a star. The morning shows a suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. This band is for all reforms, war shall be at an end. Bayonets and swords shall rust, we'll use the brain, the pen. Laden with precious freight now thunders on the progress car. At the headlight waves a suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. The ship of state for ages was guided by starlight, till the cluster in our flag almost dispelled the night. 'Tis freedom's day, our flag shall be a sun no night can mar. We'll add the light of the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. We'll have a perfect nation, we'll march from near and far, to glory 'neath the stars and stripes it shall bear the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the stars and stripes it shall bear the woman's star.